She thought he stopped loving her. He thought he wasn't enough for her. Neither of them said a word. Then, 5 years after their divorce, a letter arrived, written the very night she decided their marriage was over, lost in the mail for 5 years. When she opened it, everything she believed about why they fell apart shattered, because he never stopped loving her. He was just too afraid to say it. This is the story of two people who loved each other the entire time and lost everything to silence. Stay with us. This story might change the way you say what matters.
Welcome back to Whispers of Hope.
5 years is enough time to rebuild almost anything. Tanya knew this because she had done it, brick by brick, decision by decision. Early morning by early morning, she had taken the wreckage of a marriage and built something that looked, from the outside, like a life better than the one she had before. The apartment alone was proof. 32nd floor, floor-to-ceiling windows, a view of the Houston skyline that turned gold at sunset and electric blue after midnight. She had signed the lease 8 months after the divorce was finalized, standing in the empty living room with her realtor, telling herself she wasn't crying because she was sad. She was crying because she was free. She believed that. She needed to believe that. Her career had done what careers do when you pour everything you have into them and leave nothing for anything else. She was a senior project manager at one of the largest urban development firms in Texas, the kind of title that made people at dinner parties lean in slightly when she said it. Her team respected her. Her director had used the word indispensable in her last performance review. She had framed it, not proudly, practically, as evidence. As a reminder, on the days her apartment felt very large and very quiet, that she had not wasted the years. Her friends adored her in that particular way people adore someone who seems to have survived something difficult, with their elegance intact. Diane, her closest friend since college, once told her over wine that she was the strongest woman she had ever known. Tanya had smiled and refilled both their glasses and changed the subject, because strength, she had learned, was often just grief with better posture. She didn't hate Bob. That was the thing people always expected, and she could never deliver. There was no dramatic villain in her version of the marriage's ending. No affair, no explosion, no single moment she could point to and say, there, that is where it broke. What there was instead was quieter and somehow worse. A man who had slowly, steadily, almost politely, disappeared while still sitting across from her at dinner every night. She had spent the first year after the divorce trying to locate the precise moment the distance began. She'd replay conversations, re-examine silences, audit evenings she had once thought were ordinary. She never found a clean answer. What she found instead was a pattern. Bob receding, Bob deflecting. Bob present in body but unreachable in every way that mattered. Until one morning she woke up and realized she had been lonely inside her own marriage for so long that she had forgotten what the alternative felt like. So she left. Not in anger, in exhaustion. She filed the papers, divided the furniture with a terrible civil politeness, and moved out of the house in Katy on a Tuesday in March while Bob was at work, because she knew if she looked at his face, she might lose the nerve, and she was too tired to lose the nerve. He didn't fight it. That, more than anything, had confirmed what she believed. He didn't fight it because he didn't want to. She had made her peace with that story. She had put it in a box, labeled it finished, and placed it somewhere deep and inaccessible inside herself. She visited it less and less with each passing year. By year 3, she could go entire months without thinking about him. By year 5, she could hear his name at a mutual friend's birthday in a passing reference and feel nothing more dramatic than the dull ache of something old and healed. She was fine. She had worked very hard to be fine. And then the envelope arrived. She had come home that Thursday evening later than usual, her laptop bag heavy on her shoulder, her heels in her hand because she'd taken them off in the elevator the way she always did when no one was watching. The rain was loud against the windows. She dropped her keys in the bowl by the door, set her bag on the kitchen counter, and saw the mail she'd brought up from the lobby sitting in a small stack beside the fruit bowl. She flipped through it the way you do, Bill, magazine she'd forgotten she subscribed to. Something from her dentist, and then her fingers stopped. The envelope was brown and battered, the kind of worn that comes from years of mishandling. The stamp was old. The postal delay notice was stamped in red across the front, and beneath it, barely legible, her old address in Katy, forwarded twice before it found her here. She almost set it aside. She almost left it for later. Instead, she carried it to her desk, sat down in front of the window with the rain pressing against the glass, and opened it without ceremony. The way you open something that cannot possibly matter. She read the first line, and then she sat very, very still. She read it again. Not because she hadn't understood it, because she couldn't accept that she had. She turned to the date at the top of the page and felt something cold move through her chest. Their third anniversary, October 14th, the night she had worn the green dress and made the reservation at the restaurant downtown and spent the entire dinner watching Bob stare at his wine glass while she talked about everything except the thing she most needed to say, until she finally stopped talking altogether, and they drove home in a silence so complete it had its own weight. She had cried in the bathroom that night with the tap running so he wouldn't hear. She had decided that night that the marriage was already over, and Bob had written this letter that same night. Her hands were shaking as she turned the page. She read it once all the way through, fast. The way you read something when part of you is hoping speed will soften the impact. It didn't. By the last paragraph, her face was wet and she wasn't entirely sure when the crying had started. She set it down, pressed both palms flat on the desk, breathed. Then she picked it up and read it again. Slowly this time, line by line. The way you read something, you need to make sure you're not misunderstanding. She wasn't misunderstanding it. She read it a third time with one hand pressed hard over her mouth, because the sounds that wanted to come out were not sounds she was ready to make. Because what the letter said, what Bob had written at his desk in the house in Katy at midnight on their third anniversary, while she was crying in the bathroom 15 feet away, was not what she had spent 5 years believing. It was not an apology. It was not an explanation she had already imagined. It was something she had never once, in 5 years of grief and reconstruction and painful, disciplined healing, considered possible. And now she had to decide what to do with a truth that had arrived 5 years too late, and had just destroyed every single thing she thought she knew. The letter began the way Bob always spoke when he was being most honest, quietly, without preamble, as if he'd already rehearsed the courage it took to start. I've been sitting at this desk for 2 hours trying to figure out how to say this. We just got home. You went straight upstairs. I heard the bathroom door close, and I stood in the kitchen, and I didn't follow you, and I hate myself for that. I didn't follow you because I didn't know how to explain what's happening inside me without it, sounding like an excuse. So I'm writing it instead. Even if you never read this, even if I never send it, I need to say it somewhere. Tanya's jaw tightened. She remembered that night in pieces, the way traumatic memories tend to survive, not as a film but as photographs, snapshots, the reservation confirmation on her phone, the green dress she'd bought 2 weeks earlier, and hung on the back of the closet door so she'd see it every morning. The way she'd done her hair twice because the first attempt didn't feel like enough for the occasion. She kept reading. I watched you get ready tonight. You didn't know I was standing in the doorway. You had music playing low and you were doing something with your hair in the mirror, and you were so, God, Tanya, you were so beautiful. Not just the way you looked, the way you moved. Like someone who knows exactly where she belongs in the world. And I stood there, and instead of walking in and telling you that, I walked back downstairs, because in that moment I was so aware of everything I'm not. Tanya stopped. She looked up from the page, out at the rain-blurred Houston skyline, and her memory of that moment, her memory, surfaced with a force that almost knocked the breath out of her. She had known he was there. She had seen him in the mirror's edge, that brief shadow in the doorway, and her heart had lifted, because she'd thought he was coming in. She'd thought he was going to put his hands on her shoulders the way he used to, early in the marriage when tenderness was still easy between them. She had kept her eyes on her reflection and waited. The music low, the moment delicate and possible, and then he was gone. She had told herself that night, and 100 nights afterward, that his leaving the doorway was a verdict, that it meant she wasn't worth the walk across the room, that the man who used to reach for her without thinking had looked at her and felt nothing worth acting on. She pressed her fingers hard against the page and kept reading. You've been promoted twice in the last year. Your name is on projects I see talked about in the news. I drive past buildings going up downtown, and I know your hands are in that work. And I go to my job every morning and I process invoices for a company that doesn't know my last name, and I come home and I try to be enough for you. Tanya, I try so hard to be something worth coming home to. But tonight, watching you in that mirror, I understood something I've been running from for months. I am not enough for the life you're building. And the cruelest part is that I love you too much to be the thing that holds you back from it. The room felt very small suddenly. Tanya stood up from the desk without deciding to, walked to the window, and stood with her forehead almost touching the cold glass, the letter still in her hand, because the night he was describing, the night he had spent feeling small and unworthy and privately heartbroken, was the same night she had spent building the final case for leaving. She had sat across from him at that restaurant in her green dress and watched him stare at his wine glass and interpreted every silence as confirmation. He doesn't see me. He doesn't want this. He's already somewhere else, and I am humiliating myself by still trying. She had ordered the salmon. She remembered that for no reason, except that the mind holds strange details from devastating evenings. She had ordered the salmon and eaten it, carefully, and made conversation about things that didn't matter, because the thing that mattered most was locked behind her sternum, waiting for him to create a single opening. He never did. But she understood now, standing at this window with his letter shaking faintly in her grip, that he had been doing the same thing, waiting locked behind his own sternum. Not cold, terrified, not indifferent, convinced beyond reason that loving her out loud would only illuminate the gap between what he was and what she deserved. She went back to the desk, back to the letter. At dinner tonight, I wanted to tell you that you are the most extraordinary person I've ever been close to. I wanted to say that watching you become who you're becoming is the privilege of my life. But every time I looked at your face, I thought, she knows. She already knows she's outgrown this. And if I say it out loud, I'll see it confirmed in her eyes, and I won't survive that. So I said nothing. I've been saying nothing for so long that I think you've started to hear the silence as an answer. I need you to know it isn't. The silence isn't nothing. The silence is everything I don't know how to say yet. Tanya made a sound she hadn't planned, something between a sob and a word that didn't form, because she had heard the silence as an answer. Exactly that. She had heard it as the clearest answer he ever gave her, and she had built her entire departure on top of it, and she had spent 5 years being certain she was right. She turned the page. I'm going to put this letter in an envelope tonight. I don't know if I'll send it. I don't know if I'm brave enough, but I need you to know that whatever you decide, whatever happens between us, that tonight when you walked out of the bathroom in that green dress and looked at me across the dinner table and waited for me to say something, I was not far away from you. I was so close to you I could barely breathe. I was just too afraid of my own smallness to let you see it. She read that paragraph 3 times, too afraid of his own smallness. And she had been too afraid of being unwanted. 2 people, 1 table, both of them bleeding quietly, and neither one able to see that the other one was hemorrhaging too. The last line of the letter was short, almost casual in the way that devastating things sometimes are when the writer has run out of ways to soften them. I hope you stay, Tanya, but if you don't, I understand. I just needed you to know that it was never because I stopped. It was always because I couldn't figure out how to be worthy of starting. She set the letter down. Outside, the rain had stopped without her noticing. Houston glittered below her in the sudden quiet, wet and brilliant and indifferent to the fact that her entire understanding of her own life had just been taken apart at the seams. She sat for a long time without moving. And then slowly she reached for her phone. She opened her contacts and typed a name she had not typed in 5 years. Her thumb hovered over the search result. Because if what the letter said was true, if the silence had never been emptiness, if the withdrawal had never been rejection, if they had simply been 2 people too frightened to reach across 12 inches of table and tell the truth, then the story she had been living was not the story that had actually happened. And somewhere in Houston tonight, Bob was living inside his own version of the same lie. Her thumb was still hovering. She pressed call. He didn't answer. The call rang 4 times and went to voicemail, and Tanya hung up before the beep. Because she hadn't prepared for voicemail, hadn't prepared for the sound of his recorded voice saying his name in that unhurried way he always had, like a man who had nowhere urgent to be. She set the phone face down on the desk and sat back and pressed both hands over her face and stayed that way for a long time. She didn't try again that night. She barely slept. The next morning she went to work because she didn't know what else to do with a body that needed somewhere to be. She sat at her desk on the 24th floor of a glass building downtown, her coffee untouched beside her keyboard, her monitor glowing with a project timeline she had built herself and could not currently read. Her assistant knocked twice and asked about the Henderson file, and Tanya said yes, absolutely, give me an hour, and then sat motionless for 50 minutes before remembering she hadn't said what she was agreeing to. She called Diane from the parking garage at lunch, standing beside her car because she couldn't sit still, the Houston midday heat pressing down on her shoulders like a hand. You need to start from the beginning. Diane said, because you are not making sense. So Tanya started from the beginning. The envelope, the handwriting, the date, the letter itself, which she had photographed and read so many times in the last 18 hours that she could recite sections of it from memory without meaning to. She told Diane about Bob in the doorway watching her dress for their anniversary and feeling too small to cross the room. She told her about the silence at dinner and what it had actually meant versus what she had spent 5 years believing it meant. There was a long pause on the other end. Tanya, Diane's voice was careful. The way voices get when someone is trying to tell you something true without detonating you. You know this doesn't mean you were wrong to leave. I know that. Do you? Tanya opened her mouth and closed it again, because here was the question. She had been circling for 18 hours, without landing on it directly. The question that had kept her awake and useless and hollowed out since the moment she set the letter down the night before. Not was he lying, she knew he wasn't. Not did he love her. The letter had made that grotesquely clear. The question was harder and uglier and more personal than either of those. If his silence was fear and not indifference, then what was her leaving? Because she had left, she had made that choice. She had packed her things on a Tuesday morning and driven away and filed the paperwork and built 5 years of life on the foundation of that decision. She had told the story of her marriage as the story of a woman who finally honored herself enough to walk away from someone who had stopped showing up.
If you watched to this point, please don't forget to click the like button, subscribe, and turn on the notification. Thank you.
She had told it to Diane and to her therapist, and to herself on the hard nights when the apartment felt too quiet and the skyline felt too indifferent. And now the letter was asking her, not cruelly, not accusatorially, but simply by existing, whether the story had ever been true. It doesn't erase what I felt, she told Diane, and her voice came out steadier than she expected. I was lonely. That was real. The loneliness was real. Yes, Diane said, but I never told him I was lonely. I waited for him to notice, and when he didn't, I took it as proof that he didn't care. She stopped walking. What if he was doing the exact same thing, waiting for me to notice? And I didn't. Diane was quiet for a moment. Then, what do you want to do? Tanya looked up at the slice of blue, Houston sky visible between the parking garage's concrete levels. I don't know yet, she said, but I think I need to talk to him. She woke up Thursday morning with her phone on the pillow beside her, like she'd fallen asleep, mid-deliberation, which she had. She went to work. She came home. She changed into sweats and poured a glass of water she didn't drink and sat on the couch in the dark with the Houston lights painting the ceiling in moving color. At 11:03 p.m. on Thursday, she called. He answered on the second ring. Tanya, not surprised, not performing calm. Just her name in his voice, like he'd been expecting this call for 5 years and had simply been waiting to find out which night it would come. She had prepared an opening. She had written 3 different versions of it in her notes app. She used none of them. I got your letter, she said. The silence that followed was the longest 5 seconds of her adult life. Then it actually got there. Not a question, barely even an exhale. Just 4 words carrying the weight of every year he had spent not knowing. Bob, I know. His voice was rough. At the edges in the way voices get lated? Night when guards are down and there's no performance left in a person. I know it was a long time ago. I know you've built. Stop. She surprised herself. Don't manage this. Not tonight. I've had 2 days of managing it, and I need you to just talk to me. Actually talk to me. The way you wrote. Can you do that? Another silence. Shorter this time. Yeah, he said quietly. Yeah, I can do that. What followed was 3 hours that Tanya would spend the rest of her life being unable to fully describe to anyone who wasn't on the phone for them. It was not a fight. It was not a reconciliation. It was something rarer and more painful than either. It was two people who had loved each other in complete silence, finally using words, and discovering that the words, arriving 5 years late, were both devastating and necessary. He told her about the insecurity that had eaten him alive during her rise. Not resentment. He was clear and broken about that. Never resentment. Only a quiet terror that excellence like hers had an expiration date for men like him. She told him about the bathroom floor on their anniversary. The tap running, the loneliness so complete it had a sound. He told her he had mailed the letter and then panicked and called the post office the next morning to retrieve it, and been told it was already in transit, and spent weeks waiting for her to call and then slowly, dreadfully understanding that it had been lost. She told him she had spent 5 years believing. His silence meant she wasn't wanted. He made a sound at that, low and involuntary, like something being pressed too hard. It was the opposite, he said. It was always the exact opposite. By 2 a.m., the conversation had gone quiet in a different way than it had started. Not empty, but exhausted. The kind of silence that follows. Honesty when honesty has finally been allowed to finish. I don't know what this means, Tanya said. I don't know what we're supposed to do with this. Neither do I, Bob said. But I don't think I can let it just be nothing. Can you? She looked out at the Houston skyline, dark and glittering and enormous. And here is the question that hung in that silence, the one that will stay with you long after this story ends. If two people loved each other the entire time, if the silence was never absence but only fear, does the time lost belong to the story? Or does it belong to the ending that hasn't been written yet? No, Tanya said finally. I can't let it be nothing. Then meet me, Bob said. Just once, just dinner. No promises. Just let me see your face when we're saying the true things. The skyline blurred slightly. Okay, she whispered. And for the first time in 5 years, the word felt like a beginning instead of a surrender. She changed 3 times. Not because she was trying to impress him. She told herself that firmly. Twice while pulling a perfectly acceptable blouse off over her head and throwing it onto the growing pile on her bed. It was because every outfit felt like a statement she wasn't ready to make. Too formal meant she was trying. Too casual meant she didn't care. The green dress was out of the question for reasons that required no examination whatsoever. She settled on a simple black top and tailored trousers and her gold chain. The one she'd bought herself the year her promotion came through. The one that meant something to her that had nothing to do with Bob. She needed to walk in, there as the woman she had built, not a ghost of the woman he had known. She needed to remember, the moment the nerves hit, that she was not walking back into the marriage. She was walking into a restaurant in Midtown, Houston on a Tuesday evening, to have dinner with a man she had once loved and apparently never fully understood. She was only 7 minutes late, which for the state she was in felt like a personal triumph. He was already there. She saw him through the restaurant window before she reached the door, sitting at a corner table, slightly too upright the way people sit when they're trying not to, looked like they're waiting, his hands around a glass of water he hadn't drunk. He'd cut his hair shorter than she remembered. There was something different in his face, a stillness that hadn't been there before. The look of a man who had spent years in his own company and made a certain kind of peace with it. Then he looked up and saw her through the glass. And for one unguarded second before either of them could arrange their expressions into something manageable, she saw it, the thing his letter had described and she had never been able to see from inside the marriage. Not coldness, not distance. Something raw and careful and enormous. The look of a man trying very hard not to show how much this moment costs him. She pushed open the door. He stood up. Not dramatically, just the quiet reflex of someone whose manners were genuine. which had always been true of Bob, which was one of the 10,000 small things about him she had filed away under Do Not Revisit. She had a long list of those. "Hi," she said. "Hi," he said. They did the brief, careful thing. A hug that lasted exactly as long as felt honest and not a second longer. The kind of contact that acknowledges history without making promises. She sat down. He sat down. The waiter appeared with the timing of someone utterly indifferent to the magnitude of what was happening. At table 7, they ordered drinks with the focused politeness of two people grateful for a task. And then they were alone, with each other in 5 years, and a letter written at midnight and nowhere left to hide. "You look well," Bob said, and then immediately looked like he regretted the smallness of it. "Don't," Tanya said, not unkindly. "We're not doing that." He exhaled. Something in his shoulders dropped half an inch. "No, you're right. We're not. Tell me who you are now," she said. "Not then, now." He looked at her for a moment, surprised, and then something in his face shifted into honesty. The way faces shift when someone stops performing and starts speaking. He told her about the 2 years after the divorce that he described only as necessary and brutal. He told her he'd left the invoice job, gone back to school part-time, was now working in project coordination for a non-profit, rebuilding affordable housing in Third Ward. He said it without fanfare, without looking at her for a reaction, which meant it was real and not curated. She felt something move in her chest that she immediately catalogued and set aside for later examination. She told him about her work, the Henderson Project, the building going up on Westheimer that had her name attached, in ways that still felt surreal. She told him about Diane's wedding last spring and the speech she'd given. That made the whole room cry. She told him about the apartment, the 32nd floor, the view that she'd bought herself as evidence. "Evidence of what?" he asked. She opened her mouth to say that I was fine without you and stopped, because sitting here across from him in this honest light, she found she couldn't weaponize it the way she might have a week ago, before the letter. "That I didn't waste the years," she said instead. He nodded slowly. "Neither did you," he said, "in case that matters." It mattered. She didn't say so. The food came and went in the way food does when no one at the table is eating for hunger. Somewhere between the main course and the silence that followed it, the conversation broke open the way the phone call had broken open at 2 a.m., without a clear moment of rupture, just a sudden mutual understanding that the surface conversation had served its purpose, and what was underneath it needed air. "I need to say something," Bob said. He set down his fork, looked at her directly. "What I did, the withdrawing, the silence, all of it, I called it protecting you. In my head, in the letter, I framed it as stepping back so I wouldn't hold you back." He paused. "But that's not the whole truth, and you deserve the whole truth." Tanya was very still. "The whole truth is that I was a coward," he said. "I was terrified of being rejected, so I made myself unavailable first. I told myself it was selfless. It wasn't. It was self-protection dressed up as sacrifice, and it cost us everything, and I am more sorry for that than I know how to say at a dinner table or in a letter, or in any format that currently exists." The restaurant hummed quietly around them. Someone laughed at the bar. A glass was set down. Tanya looked at him for a long moment. "I left before you could tell me to go," she said. Her voice was even, but only just. "I didn't give you the chance to explain because I was so terrified of hearing that you'd stopped loving me that I made the decision for you. I told myself it was self-respect." She stopped. It was the same thing, Bob, different direction. Same fear. He looked at her like she had said something that he had spent 5 years waiting to hear confirmed. "We were so afraid of losing each other," he said quietly, "that we made sure it happened." "Yes," she said. "That's exactly what we did." The words sat between them. Not as an accusation, not as an absolution, but as the first completely true thing they had ever said to each other about the marriage. And the relief and the grief of it arrived simultaneously. They stayed at the table long after the check was paid, talking in the way people talk when time has stopped being a pressure and become instead a gift neither of them had expected to receive tonight. They talked about what they had learned about themselves in the years apart, about the therapy, and the hard mornings and the specific loneliness of being the person who left, and not knowing if you were right, about whether forgiveness was something you gave another person or something you gave yourself. They did not talk about the future. Not directly, not yet. When they finally stood to leave, Houston night air meeting them at the door, warm and thick with the smell of approaching rain, Bob stopped on the sidewalk and turned to her. Same time next week, he said. No performance, no strategy, just a man asking a woman if she would be willing to sit across from him again and continue being honest. Tanya looked at him for a long moment, at the face she had loved and misread, and mourned and reconstructed from a letter written at midnight 5 years ago. Yes, she said. She walked to her car. She didn't look back. But 3 steps before she reached the door, her phone buzzed. A text from Bob. She stopped under a streetlight and read it, and the breath left her body completely, because what it said changed the entire shape of what dinner had been. Revealed something he hadn't been able to say to her face, something that made the last 5 years and the letter and the silence and the fear and the long phone call and this entire evening suddenly, devastatingly land differently. She stood under that light for a very long time, and then slowly she turned around. She turned around and Bob was still standing there, not moving toward her, not performing, just standing under the restaurant, awning with his hands in his pockets and the Houston night behind him, watching her read his words on a screen the way he had never been able to watch her read them on paper. 5 years ago when it mattered, and the postal service swallowed them whole. She walked back to him slowly. Not running, she was done running in both directions, just walking deliberately, like a woman who had made a decision with her whole self and not just the part of her that was afraid. She didn't say anything when she reached him. Neither did he. They stood together on that sidewalk in the warm, Houston dark, and something passed between them that had no name yet, which was fine, because not everything true needs to be named immediately to be real. She drove home alone. That part was important. She wasn't ready for anything that moved faster than honest. And honest, she had learned this week, had its own pace that could not be rushed without breaking something. She parked in her building's garage and sat in the car for a moment before going up. And then, without planning it, without managing it, without it being a performance for anyone including herself, she smiled. Not the careful smile she gave at work when things went well. Not the brave smile she had perfected for the years when people told her how strong she was and she had to agree convincingly. This was something older and quieter and completely unguarded. The smile of a woman who had walked through something true and come out, the other side still standing. The letter had not fixed anything. She understood that clearly, standing in the elevator on the way up to the 32nd floor. It had not restored the years. It had not erased the bathroom floor on their anniversary, the tap running, the loneliness with its own weight and sound. It had not guaranteed her anything about next week or the week after, about what she and Bob were building, or whether the foundation would hold. But it had told the truth. After all the silence and all the distance, and all the stories they had built on top of the wrong assumptions, the letter had simply, finally told the truth. And it turned out that was not a small thing. It turned out that was the only thing. She made coffee when she got home. Let it stay warm this time. She sat at her desk by the window, the Houston skyline quiet and glittering below her, and she unfolded the letter one more time. Not urgently, not with shaking, hands carefully, the way you handle something you have decided to keep. She read it slowly, every word, beginning to end, and when she finished, she set it down gently beside her cup. Like evidence, like history, like the beginning of a story she didn't yet know the ending of, and looked out at the city and breathed. The coffee was warm. The letter was open. And somewhere on the other side of Houston, Bob was awake too. The question now, the one that will stay with you long after this story fades, is this. When two people finally tell the truth after 5 years of silence, is that the end of the story they lost? Or the first page of something neither of them has been brave enough to imagine yet? If this story moved you even a little, if you saw yourself in the silence, in the fear, in the letter that arrived too late, hit that like button right now, because this kind of storytelling takes everything we have, and your support is what makes it possible to keep going. Drop a comment below and tell us, do you think Tanya and Bob should try again? Or is some love better left as a beautiful, honest ending? We read every single one. Subscribe if you aren't already, and turn on the notification bell, because the next story we're telling will hit even harder than this one, and you do not want to be the last one to find out when it drops. We'll see you there. We spend so much time protecting ourselves from the pain of not being wanted that we forget the person across from us is doing the exact same thing. Bob didn't stop loving Tanya. Tanya never stopped loving Bob. They just stopped saying it out. Loud, and when silence left long enough starts to sound like an answer it never was. The lesson is this: the most dangerous distance in a relationship is not miles or years. It is the space between what you feel and what you say. Fear dressed as silence, withdrawal dressed as sacrifice, love made invisible by the very people who felt it most. Don't let the letter arrive 5 years too late. Say the true thing now, while there is still time to hear the answer.
The story you just watched is a work of fiction created purely for entertainment and storytelling purposes. All characters, names, events, and situations are entirely fictional and do not represent any real person, living or deceased. Any resemblance to actual persons or real events is purely coincidental. This story explores themes of love, fear, emotional growth, and relationships. Viewer discretion is advised, as some emotional content may be sensitive for some audiences. We hope this story moves you, challenges you, and reminds you that healing, and however costly, is always worth it.
Please don't forget to click the like button, subscribe, and turn on the notification. Thank you.